Hello, this is Mark Buckshaw, and this is the latest in my Construction Marketing Ideas video series. Today I'd just like to talk briefly about social media and how to make it work and what it's worth to your business or practice. I did an interesting analysis last night looking at the value of leads generated from social media activity and blogging. And I came up with an interesting number. Now, the calculations here to make this are based on the size of my mailing list for LinkedIn's Construction Marketing Ideas group and the email inbound list that are voluntarily signed up for the Construction Marketing Ideas newsletter. And the total volume of names on those two lists, there's some overlap, is approximately 3,000 names. Overall, I've attributed approximately $100,000 in business that has resulted from the blogging and the social networking activities. And if you do a little calculation of 3,000 divided by 100,000, you come up with the impressive number of $33 a name. In other words, if you put the number of names in your network and divide that factor, you'll come up with the estimated value per lead or name in your social network. Now, this is a calculation which may have some flaws in it, which I'll go into in a minute, but I'd like to share with you an observation I got from Tim Klabundi, who operates the Design and Construction Network. And Tim has a massive network. He's got 26,000 people in his network, operations and local subgroups in upwards of 9 cities, which are setting up local events. He's begins paid speaking engagements. He's recently joined another business as a partner with a good salary to start, so he's got equity and economic interest in his business. And he described how much money he's been making from social media. Now, these are rough numbers. They're based on some calculations I'll explain in a minute, but I'm going to suggest that he indicated to me that he's received about $750,000 to possibly $1 million in revenue over the last few years, of which perhaps $500,000 came in the last year. Now, if you do the same divider factor of the number of names on his list, divide by the revenue he's attributed to it, he's coming up around $38 a name. So that $30 range seems to be not an invalid number to work on the value per social media lead that you can accumulate and the worth of it. Now, I've got to put some qualifiers on this. Obviously, not all names are worth the same, and the way you get them is going to factor the value, and what you do with them is going to be. For example, I can attribute a large portion of my social media business to a small fraction of clients. Maybe I can put them in a handful. One was a major association in Ontario that not only purchased a large number of my books, gave me a speaking engagement at that association, gave me references to the members of that association who then turned out to features and revenue. So the one relationship parlayed into more and more business, which is ongoing because of the repeat relationships that have developed. There's obviously many people on the social networks that I belong to that have done nothing with our business. I think if you went to Kim, you'd have the same thing. Of the 26,000, he, in a conversation with me, he noted that about 10% are getting value from this stuff, and the remainder are just names on a list. If you put it at that level, then you can say that the percentage of names that are relevant to your social media, divide by 10, then you multiply by 10, and you'll come up with a whopping number of about $350 to $400 per truly important lead in social media. Now, where does this quantification have some value? Well, it's not just a case of gathering large numbers of names. For example, if you spam or purchase names list, you're not going to get very much value from that. A list of that sort are going to be worth a fraction of a cent. What goes into the process is what you do with the information you get and how you acquire these names and how you make them work for you to your best business interest. In other words, what are the qualities of the relationships that happen after the initial process that people do decide to connect with you in some way or another through your social media, whether they send an email, ask to be on your list, or they join in some sort of group and you can quantify the numbers of them. In other words, how many likes on Facebook isn't terribly useful to you. If you've got the next level where they've actually communicated with you and they've given you some contact information, that's obviously a higher value. And obviously the highest value is if they've converted to a relationship that's actually doing business with you. Social media, after all, is not an end, it's a means to an end. It's a tool, not the answer in itself. Playing purely on the social media world and not taking it beyond that is not going to get you very far. So what you need to do is find a way to integrate your social media activities with your broader interest in business, and find a way to integrate or connect those social media relationships so that they can go offline into a personal contact or relationship. That may start with an email phone contact, but it can graduate to a phone conversation, and better yet, a one-on-one conversation, and at the highest level, invitation to speak in front of a group, so then you can parlay the value of the one-on-one relationship to a multiplicity of relationships. Then, of course, this thing takes on its own life, because as people in that audience begin to connect with you or refer to you, you get a snowball effect, as Tim Klibbundy described. There's a certain point at which you can actually get to the point where you don't have to manage this that actively. You don't have to be involved day to day in things, because the dynamics of the social group will grow on its own, almost in a viral or self-expansionary effort. I can't say I've quite reached that stage on my social media, but certainly some of the leading gurus and leaders have. Well, how do you get there? Well, I'm going to talk about that a little later on, but I'll give you a few basic tips. Number one, you've got to go get involved in this in some way. Pick one relevant social media service if you haven't already done it. My survey indicates LinkedIn is the most valuable for business-to-business communication. The survey also indicates a lot of people for business-to-consumer work are using Facebook. Twitter seems to have a very popular niche with certain groups, and it seems to straddle both business-to-business computer. But my personal favorite is one that most people don't rate that highly, and I'll explain why in a minute: Google+. Now, the reason most people don't rate it that highly is people haven't signed on to it or don't use it yet, because it's a relatively new service. It was launched by Google this fall, less than 6 months ago. And so it doesn't have quite the traction of the other better-known social media outlets. Some people say, who needs another social media service? And I would agree there's an element of reason to be doubting that. But the reason why I have a favor for Google Plus is simply this: Google Plus owns the biggest search engine in the system. And obviously, one of the most tangible benefits you can get from effective social media participation is the ability to enhance your search engine rankings for your own websites. The second thing is, because it's relatively new, it's relatively open territory. It's relatively open to establish yourself as an early player or early participant in the market before it gets too crowded with others. You can own names, you can present yourself as leader, you can become a thought leader in this space. So if and when it catches on, you're going to be better off. Now, there's no guarantees in any of these things. Tim Klibbundy, in my conversation with me, made a remark that he probably was a bit of the right place at the right time when he set up his LinkedIn group, and he could have picked another one to follow or be involved in, and it wouldn't have worked. There is an element of chance in these things. There's also, of course, a drive and a will to take things beyond the obvious. I know another person who was equally involved in LinkedIn at the early stages and is still struggling to make a business work. This person could not make the conversion from social media to the larger relationship and value services that are offered. In other words, you have to have something at the other end of the social media. Social media is not your absolute answer. In conclusion, think of the value of your names that you accumulate through references and inbound leads. Put an equation on them. I'm coming up with a number of between $30 and $40 per name. That's a pretty valuable thing to spend a few seconds to gather. And that will come by providing interesting, useful content, developing new relevant groups, and connecting and spending your time and committing your resources to an appropriate social media network. I'd like to wish you all well, and if you want, most Fridays at 2 p.m. I will have a hangout on Google+. You can get that through the Construction Marketing Ideas site on Google+. And if those words don't mean much to you, take a bit of time and Google them, or look at my Construction Marketing Ideas blog at constructionmarketingideas.com for further information. Thanks again, and best wishes.